Thank you.
Are we ready to start?
Sure, absolutely. Just about on time.
I am very honored and happy to welcome Ann Myosho Kyle-Brown, who has so graciously agreed to visit us here. We've been reading your essay in we call it the No Words Book Club. It's in the book Zen Teachings for Challenging Times, which I am telling everyone is a book that should be very widely read, more widely known than it is, I think. And I'm trying to drum up some attention for it by inviting all these fine teachers. In this case, the Four Noble Truths of Practice in Times of Challenge and Struggle is the story of Reverend Myosho's travels in her life from being a mother of 8 children. It's the Brady Bunch.
Yeah, it's a Brady Bunch. Mm.
And also, I say, you honestly speak about children had their troubles. They have gone through different issues, which so many of our members are facing. So that is one reason that your writings have touched the people they have. Reverend Myosho also has followed a fantastic path. She has been a student of Akiba Roshi, who is a marvelous teacher. He's the real thing from Japan, has been in California for years, is trying to build Tempio-Zan, which is a full-blown Japanese training monastery in California. They've been working on it for years. And we're suggesting also, if you benefit today, we leave it to everyone, but do please, whatever you can afford, whatever you feel is right, we're asking a little dana, a little donation for Tempio-Zan to help with the construction of that monastery. That will be a great treasure to everyone. Myosho trained in California with many teachers, including Kwang Roshi. But what's so interesting, and I hope she will speak about at some point, is she also went to Japan and did it, shall we say, the old-fashioned way. She was at with Aoyama Roshi, who I think many people know from the Aichi Senmon Nisodo. That's the women's monastery in Japan, which is such a special, I will say, in many ways, I hope she speaks about it, how it's different from the men's monasteries. It's a very, very special environment they have there. She did Zweisei at Eiheiji and Sojiji. She is Osho. I should really refer to her, I guess, as Myosho Osho, which kind of rhymes. It's nice. But in any event, thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
We're going to just take a moment to sit zazen, and then I will turn everything over to you and let you take it from there. All right? If everyone would, if they would just sit as you are, wherever you are. We're going to sit just a moment of zazen. Thank you. I will now turn everything over to Reverend Kyle-Brown. I just want to acknowledge briefly, we have, this is just wonderful for us. We have people here sitting in Cyprus, I see, in the UK. We have in Germany, of course, Canada and the United States. Bjorn is in Spain. And I want to acknowledge Washin is in Ukraine, Odessa, Ukraine. He is there, and as he likes to say, he's here as long as the power stays on with us. But right now, let me turn everything over to you, Myosho. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I live a very quiet life. I live literally in the middle of a meadow. So this sort of thing I don't usually do. And in fact, I've never done. So good luck to us all. I want to acknowledge that you may be familiar with the term Ichigo Ichie, one meeting, one time. So right this moment, we are a Sangha. We're the Treeleaf Sangha of practicing in challenging times. It will never happen again. And I want to bow to the preciousness of the fact that we all got together at this moment. I want to offer this to the people suffering in Ukraine, where every day my heart and everybody's hearts are being broken. And I hope that what we discuss and what comes out is beneficial and useful and worthy of your time, everyone who's here, and your attention and the effort you made to come here. So that's my intention and dedication. I'm just going to start talking about this topic. Jundo-san asked, because I discussed it in my article essay, to talk about mental illness. And I use that term myself in the essay, but I wish I hadn't. Now I have a little regret about using that term, because all of the hindrances in Buddhism are forms of mental illness. You know, ill will is a mental illness. The three poisons, greed, anger, and delusion, are mental illnesses. Basically, our entire practice is dedicated to discovering what is wholesome and learning how to cultivate that, and certainly discovering what is unwholesome. And so we're really always talking about mental illness, because these are mind states that we all confront. So mine may have been focused on being a mother or a parent, but someone else could be in ill health and have carried that their whole lives. Someone else, I mean, everything, each one of you, has your own struggles. So I want to start by saying that being a human being is really difficult in any time. And it is excruciatingly difficult when you give birth to more human beings. So all that we each individually carry and struggle to move through and understand, and all the phases of our lives, and our successes, which turn out to be failures, and our failures, which turn out to be successes, and all of these confusing becomings are kind of like a fun house with lots of mirrors when you have children. The Buddha very explicitly talked about that we don't have free will, ultimate free will, and it's codependent origination. We think about that. Scholars deeply contemplate that. It took me a while to kind of understand that when I first started to practice. When we have children, it's not even a question for a minute thinking you have free will. You certainly have lots to consider and to act on. I'm a poet, so you're going to get a little bit of poetry today too. I hope that's okay. So here's what I wrote in 1971. It's very short. Some children I know separate their thoughts into 5-minute gifts. These they present to me all day, every day, without interruption. So one of the most difficult aspects about having children is constantly being interrupted in the middle of the night while you sleep. While you're being interrupted with one, another one interrupts you. The school calls. Your thoughts interrupt you. It's like being a juggler in front of Notre Dame University, like just keeping it all moving and all afloat or not, and dealing with the feelings of that makes for a very interesting practice. So I needed Zen quite desperately. I didn't know it. I just thought of it, how we present ourselves, and no matter what's going on, we're like, I'm fine. So that's kind of how I was. I'd always been interested in Zen. If you read I won't go into the whole essay because some of you have read it, but, I was interested in it from when I was a child. It's kind of bizarre. And a girl, 12-year-old girl, 13-year-old girl in Menlo Park, California during the 50s, how would I hear about Zen, but I did from my older brother. And I just remember the word Zazen. My brother was listening to KPFA, a community station, radio station. And I know Alan Watts was talking and he mentioned Zazen. And literally the hair on the back of my neck stood up. What's that all about? Why would a girl, in Palo Alto, California, lower middle class, why would I be that way? But over and over, when I came anywhere near Zen, I was like, so it was a gift that was given to me, this interest, this deep responsiveness to Zen. But I never could quite find it. Because in the 50s, it wasn't just around the corner, monks everywhere and people offering the Dharma. So there was just a little taste of it here, or a little taste of it in a song, in the 60s, somebody might make some reference. And I actually actively looked for it. I went to New York as a young woman, and I would walk down the street and I'd say, is that Zen? And it would be a yoga studio. Like, oh, is that Zen? It was Satchidananda. I just love to say his name, or Muktananda, or all the Anandas, like there were all these things going on. There was a community food store. It looked like it could be a Zen center to me, everywhere I looked, and I'd say, is this Zen? And like, no, this isn't what I heard. This isn't the thing I was wanting to find. So it wasn't until I was a big old more than grown woman in my late 40s that I guess it was late 40s when I chanced upon Akiba Roshi, and because they were down the street from us and they were building a temple, and I started looking and just so, and when I saw this little flyer inside this endo that says sesshin 5 o'clock in the morning or 4:30, I was like, ooh, I want to do that. Why would I want to do that? Why does anyone not only do it, but get so excited they can hardly wait? I actually, Akiba Roshi showed me the side gate to get into to Kojinon Temple. And I was so excited about this session, I didn't know what to call it. So I could hardly stand it. So I was like up early and got dressed and took a shower like at 3 a.m. So I get ready for this big event. And I remember I came over to the Zendo, and I had not been there since I had met him. So I came in, it looked very dark. And I opened the little side gate that you can come and go at any time. And I walk in, and they have the stones that you walk on, like a Japanese garden. And I'm like, I don't have a cell phone to light my way. I'm just trying to get my night vision going. And I'm walking there, and I go to the Zendo. It's awfully dark, and then a dog starts barking. They have a guard dog. I was like, oh, I don't know. So I kind of quickly went over to the Zendo, opened the door, no lights on inside. And I went in, and then I felt around. There was a little dimmer light, and I turned it on a little, and I looked at the flyer like, oh, it's next weekend. So I broke into the Zendo a week early. So that's a kind of excitement I had, the mystery of wanting to practice Zen. When I left the temple, and now I'm creeping out, like I just broke into these people's house, like I'm creeping out, and I look over, and there's a light on from inside the house, and there's just the silhouette of Akiba Roshi. And he just goes, and I was like, came back the next week. So at the time, I won't go into more of like how I met him, which was so much fun. But anyway, At the time, I was terribly, I presented very well. I had married again and I had inherited other children. So I had my own 4 children. I had my husband's actually 5 children. One of them passed away. So we say 8 children now, but the other one is always there. And I was very troubled, in particular about one of the children. I have to be very careful because this is going to go on YouTube, right? And my kids, I'll be long gone, and my kids will go, "What did she say?" So I'm going to be walk a delicate line here. But my children are really no different than anybody else's children. You know, there's just more of them, many more examples. So I was quite troubled at that time about one of my children. In fact, I went to hear Blanche Hartman at the San Francisco Zen Center give a Dharma. Actually, she came to Kojinan, so I was all excited. Came to see her speak. And the first thing she said after hello was she talked about she had a daughter, and her daughter, she had a lot of I don't remember the details of what she said. They're really not important, but clearly she had a mother-daughter difficulty going, and it was, and she went into some description. It was a small little group. So she went into some description about what the nature of their difficulties was. And then she stopped and she goes, "Who would have such a daughter like this?" She goes, "I would." What kind of a person? This kind of person would have this daughter. And that gave me permission to be the kind of person that actually had the children I have. So whether you have children or not, you all have been children and grown up in families. So you can approach this from a variety of ways. So I was quite worried about this one daughter. And I mean, more than worried. I looked great. I had a nice husband, nice house down the street. Everybody dressed pretty well. You know, the punk was a little outrageous, but that's okay. We all presented pretty well. But underneath we're a blended family. I got to inherit ex-wives, for instance. Who would have thought I'd have 2 ex-wives who were actually even hostile, you know, whatever they had going on with my husband, new husband. So, and he inherited ex-husbands, and it's so confusing. And then some of those exes got married, and then they had attitudes, and then they had children, or already had children. Were more stepchildren. You could just trip over all the stepping you were doing in this family. And it was not simple. And I thought, oh, I'm just going to come in and love everybody, and it's going to be great. I did that, and it was really challenging. So this one daughter, I was so worried about. I was worried for her life. And so at the first session, which was literally the first time I ever sat, I just came in, I didn't know better, and sat. And just started. I didn't have any instruction. I didn't know anything. I just started sitting, but I was really sitting. I was going brewing down. And my mind was a clutter with all the things I had said to this daughter and asked of this daughter and disciplined this daughter, and shocked by everything I could possibly be in a troubled state about this daughter. And all of a sudden in Zazen, this vision or this picture of her came up where she was literally in the ocean at night, you know, just waves coming everywhere, being beset on all sides by waves. And in that moment, I forgot about myself and all my responses to her behavior and worries and cares and guilts and you name it. And I just thought, oh, she's sick. She's in trouble. And all of my self-blame and all of my blame of her and everything, all my ideas, what my grandmother told me and my mother and my, blah, 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 you know, all my apologies, you know, all that just, and it was like, oh, she's sick. And so I literally got up and left the Zendo, which sounds like clang. Out I go, running back home. The piercing breakthrough of the confusion and chaos that I was in was so strong that I just ran right home and I called her on the telephone. And, you know, we had a hello, mom, kind of, you know, push pull, loved her dearly to bits. So we were very good today. But at that moment, she was in her late teens very, very difficult time. And I don't know what was different, except that I'd had this experience in Zazen. And suddenly when I go, hi, I'm listening to her. I'm listening to her in a whole body way. And I care. And I don't even know, mentally, I don't have a good description, except that it changed right then. She started kind of cautiously saying something to me. And I was like, oh, compassion, curiosity, interest, care, these things just naturally came out without all the layers that I'd had before. And that was the beginning of our relationship turning around, of her starting to make some different choices in her life, of us being able to work together. So that was Zazen, the miracle of Zazen. And that kind of breakthrough can happen in anything that we're worried about in our lives, right? We sit Zazen and all of a sudden it's recontextualized completely. So that's one description of just how it would play with one particular member of the family. We have our eldest actually had terrible struggles and ultimately killed herself. I would say suicide, but that sounds like one step removed from what actually happened. She killed herself. And she had been so troubled for so long that I do believe that everyone in the family had a first response of relief, just this threatening mind state that she had always carried, or certainly had maybe came in with. I didn't meet her till later, but I had always seen it when I had seen her. That was at peace. After, and then of course, many, many other feelings besides that, but that was the first, like if you blow a candle out, like, we're not supposed to blow them out, but anyway, just that sense of release. So quite a while later, I still felt, still active in me was so much turmoil, and still in the family, so much turmoil, and all the responses now ricocheting off, blame, accusation. Like now it's like the fight is among all of us. The fight she had inside herself that she put on us. Now everybody's like, very, very painful. So I had a memento from her. And one day I called up Osho-san and I said, and I'm 3.5 hours away. I said, I need help. I'm going to come down and see you. He said, okay, Myosho-san. So I drove 3.5 hours and I had this memento from her in the car seat next to me with the seatbelt around it, just a representation of her, something that was hers. And I'm just, the whole time I feel like there's this bluster going on next to me, this right next to me in the car seat. I said, we're going down to see Osho-san. And we went into the temple, and it was Osho-san and his wife Yoshi-san and me in Kojinon. We went up to the altar. Osho-san was in his robes, and we placed this item on the altar. And then we did some chanting, Daihi Shindarani. I think Daihi Shindarani is the only one we did. It was so intense. And I'm not a well-trained monk because I live in the middle of nowhere. I forget everything, but I know how to offer a stick of incense to, but I couldn't even remember, like, he gave it to me and I was like, what do I'm like, he just took it back. He did the whole ceremony. I just stood there like this. And we did this simple ceremony. And before it was over, I don't know what he said, but he started yelling like he did like what I guess you'd call an exorcism. I was raised Catholic, so that term, but he did like a like powerful, like boom in the zendo. And then he stopped and he went, everything okay now, Myosho-san? So I thanked him. I couldn't even stay there after that. I thanked them, but I was just in such a state. So I took this memento and I put it back on the front seat of the car and put a seatbelt around it and started driving it back. And it was like, there's peace now. And even though family would go on with, they're not going to temples as I was to find peace or to directly address the upset. They're still ricocheting like, pinball machine, off the walls of each other. But it did start to calm down. And I began to speak about it with everyone in a different way. And over time, I began to see this daughter as the humblest prayer in our family. So that which was the most extreme, the most violent, the most threatening, the most reckless, careless, you just go on with all of the expressions, was recontextualized spontaneously into the humblest prayer of all these people in this family, all these children who are like growing up, they're not all babies, right? And all these extended family, like everybody with all their senses of self and who's on first and all of that, this daughter became, for me, the quietest. And all of what she demonstrated before became for me the most crying out for help. Like, hello, anybody there? So that's a relatively acute experience, complicated blended family, such an extreme suffering. But that doesn't mean that each child and each relationship is not as keen in its own way. And so I could talk a lot about each of the children. But I think what might be a better idea would be to talk about my practice around having all these children and the impact of the influence of Zen and Zazen in particular, right? Zazen is Zen, on my life and on my development. And I want to also talk about my own burdens of self, that I grew up in a very difficult family myself. So I did not arrive here like, polished and ready to go out and make my way in the world. I stumbled out into the world. I didn't know I was stumbling out in the world. I kind of marched out, but in my heart, I was like, where am I going? I tried my best, but I, over time, had to come to understand that I wasn't stable. And by stable, I mean my brother and my sisters are not stable either. I have this little refrain in my article that telling all these stories I'm telling you, but if you came to our home for dinner, you would have thought we were just lovely, oh, what a nice person. So I was a perfectly lovely person who didn't realize yet that I literally had not grown up with stability. And so I was always kind of trying to figure out where it was, the ground of being, to stand stable. And I didn't know I was doing that. I thought there was something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me. Like, I'm not like other people. I could so tell the difference if I met someone whose mom and dad had been able to be there for them and make sure they got their homework done and brush their teeth and send them off to school and loved them up. And I could just I don't know, their skin looked better and their hair looked, you know what I mean? They just looked like healthy. And I'd say, oh, I might have nice skin or something, but I'm not stable. What is this problem I have? It took me a long time through practice of Zazen, to own, not just that I wasn't stable. I could do that usually blaming my parents, right? Well, I could kind of stabilize myself with insulting other people, right? That's one strategy. But before I could accept and befriend my own lack of stability, And it's something that has to be refriended over and over, because the defaults are very deep and strong. And given the right kind of circumstances, then I can be thrown back on my heels. And then I have to, like, come back into the stability that you can acquire and cultivate with Zen. So to own that, not only did I not have a stable environment, but I didn't have the deep neural pathways in my mind and in my heart that I could logically count on to face the world and figure it out. I had like little neural pathways that came to a dead end or skewed off on some odd angle. And so I had to be very conscious, and still have to be very conscious, right? On my deathbed, I will try to be very, very conscious and befriend my lack of stability, and know it is one of the gifts that I received. It has engendered in me a profound sense of compassion for other people who are suffering. I don't know, and it didn't do the same thing to all my siblings. I have, and I credit Zen to a great degree. We're all older now, my siblings and I. We were younger. We all had our attitudes and our who's on first and who's oldest and who's all that stuff that goes down in a family. And the fact that compassion would be one of my long suits, in this life, I'm tremendously grateful for, because it starts with compassion for the self, eh? You have to start there. You have to give your parents a break. You have to just understand that life is this big dependent origination, and it's nobody's fault, mine or anyone's. I met a very, very wise woman. She could have been a monk, but she wasn't in our practice and in our lineage. And she was starting to ask me, getting to know me, ask me questions about my life. And so she goes, "What's your earliest memory?" And so I remembered some early memory. And my earliest memory was somebody making me eat carrots when I didn't want to when I was like 3 years old. I'm still mad, like, Lordy, I'm still mad at this guy, like he was a godfather, and he thought it was his responsibility to make me eat my carrots. So I still, if I think of him, I can get, it's a little edgy, so, stay in my soul. So, though we don't talk about having them. But I came to a point where I said, "Ann, I had to work my way through high school. I was on a working scholarship at this Catholic girls' school at Santa Rosa, a boarding school. Our mom sent us all away. Sent us away. Like, she got us into a very fine school as boarding students that nobody could afford. So we had to wash dishes, but I was talking about, like, poor me. Like, I know people who work their way through college, but working your way through high school, I mean. And so then this friend, very compassionate, said, "So, Polly, wow, how much did that cost probably to go to that school?" I said, "Well, I don't know, but there was a lot of rich kids there too." And she goes, "Well, what do you think it probably cost, like in today's money, and we could go back and figure out what it was in 1950, whatever." And we figured it was, a lot of money. And she goes, "And there were 3 of you going, right? You and your 2 sisters." I said, "Yeah." She goes, "So your mom was living with a friend of hers because she couldn't afford to maintain a separate house, right? She was like a traveling salesperson. Is that right? Well, she sent you to this school while you're in high school, while your dad is in such bad shape." And I said, yeah, she did that. And just right then, I recontextualized. She helped me to recontextualize the whole thing. God forbid if I'd gone to high school out of this quagmire of a family that was so troubled. I mean, I think my sisters and I would all have been pregnant at 12 or something. I mean, we no more knew how to take care of ourselves. We were little Catholic school parochial kids, and also we're in this big public high school. I didn't know what a boy was, I didn't know anything. Zip, because my mom, quote unquote, protected us, so we didn't know anything. So I think she took one look at us marauding through that high school and sent us off to this boarding school and probably saved us. And how do I remember it? How did I remember it? as I had to work my way through school, you know. So what I want to talk about is that, you know, whether you have children or don't have children, you were a child. And we all know what it means to suffer. You know, if you're born Black in a white country, if you're overweight in a fashion period where everybody's skinny as a rail, or vice versa, if you're tall or short, or rich or poor, or educated or not, then you feel like left out or something's awry, right? Something's awry. And we can just carry that around with us forever. So I want to just interrupt with a little thought right here. After I wrote this essay and it was published in this lovely book, I felt so honored to be included in it, really so grateful. The book just disappeared, right? So that's what happens, you know, with artists. Maybe you guys, all of you are artists to the degree you put something out there, it's going to change my life, and plunk, and you never hear a darn word about it. The night that was going to make everything different, crickets. So all of a sudden, it was so nice that Chundo-san suddenly called and said, I said, the book, someone's reading it. Oh my golly, nobody's ever called me up afterwards. And so this is all a very big joy. I'm getting off on a tangent here. I have to remember why I interrupted. I know. The book was published. And so I gave it to my teacher and his wife, and some other people were at the Zendo. And someone who's very, very versed in Buddhism said, why didn't you talk about Zen? I said, excuse me? She goes, you didn't talk about Zen. I said, it's all Zen. She goes, no, Myosho-san. You just talked about your life. You didn't talk about Zen. And I thought, oh, Lordy, what did I do, you know? And so that's what I'm doing now, again, right? Talking about my life. But it's all Zen. So I realized I'm not an academic, although if you were here, like you would think I was lovely. If you were here, you'd see my library was lovely. I have books all over the place. I have them in boxes. I can't. And we recently had a renovation, and I thought, well, I'm just going to put the most special books that I really like. And people give me books. Maybe I didn't read them. I read them all. I'd read all these books for decades. Couldn't read enough, right? But I'm not an academic. But I can research like crazy. I can get into the underbelly of a newt and figure out how it works. I can do all that. I have a good mind. But Zen for me, because it was so needed with the chaos in my life, I had to put it to work like a plow. So I took every word like, okay, that's it, and just started tilling the soils of the confusion of my life. So I guess if I was a psychologist, you'd say that I had a practicum. You know, I'm not a professor at the university teaching psychology. I'm down there in the trenches with my Zen. And I'm the same way with my writing. You know, I used all of my writing skills to make a living for many years doing grant proposals. You know, I'm basically a poet. I thought that God at that point had a very Black sense of humor, that he made a poet, someone who's working on budgets and things, you know. But you do what you have to do, right? To survive and to prosper and to not lose touch with love and compassion, because without that, we just shrivel up. So I just want to say that these stories or examples that I'm giving you, I'm not quoting Dogen, and I'm not, although I can do some quotes, a quote here or two if I care to. I don't even always quote my teachers, like Akiba Roshi or Kwang Roshi or Gyukenet Roshi or all the Roshis, right? I can. Every word that anyone has said to me went right in and got planted in the farm or the land of myself. So I am profoundly grateful, but I'm not one of the ones, in case you're wondering what I'm talking about, I'm not one of the ones that talks about chapter and verse, so to speak. Although I did open by saying mental illness is really the 3 poisons and the 5, you know, hindrances and all of that. So I can count 2 in Buddhism, so to speak, right? So I want to say many more things, but I think I'm going to read a poem. I don't know how we're doing on time, by the way. Have I used up all the time already? Oh, I don't even know. Oh, we're getting close, right? Okay, so there's a couple of little poems I want to read because I'm a poet. So this one is kind of amusing. It's called The Answer. I found the answer once. I put it in my pocket. I found the answer twice. I locked it in my locket. I found the answer thrice, but then I lost. Then I found the answer thrice, but then I lost the question. But then I found the question right where I lost it. So that seems to be learning Zen in my life, or learning everything, right? There's not a single thing that I know, from tying my shoelaces to using oryoki to even old days smoke a cigarette, nothing that someone didn't teach me, that I didn't watch and learn from them. So dependent origination, I am everything that's been given to me that I've experienced or witnessed or seen, am experiencing you all today. So just see here. So I wrote a poem about poetry, which later on I realized was about Zazen. So we could call it Zazen instead of poetry. This has the function of tapping from the central root, the marrow of the core. This is the metaphor only, crippled as it is, that gives meaning only to what is. This has the function of naming the shadows on my soul. Light in the dark from words is not to be named. Together at once, hard gained, momentary one, and frightening, enlightening what is not between myself and the sun. Zazen. So I'm just going to check my little list here. When I was Shuso, when in Mondo, there was an 11-year-old boy, a tea student of Yoshi-san's, who was Benji at Mondo. So he got to ask the first question. I had no idea what he was going to ask. He's adorable with his tea outfit on, and I'm terrified with my staff stomping on the ground. And he says, Shuso, however we do it, right? Screams at me like, you have so many children. You say you love everyone the same, something like that. But you have 4 children. What's the difference between your children and all the other children? There's a little child asking me that. I said, nothing. Only one thing. I am more intimate with my own children than I am with all the children of the world. I get to have intimacy with them. That's the difference. These kids are in my face their whole lives. Right? So, and it's never easy the whole way. With so many of one's up, one's down, but it kind of doesn't matter what your journey is, right? If it's as an academic or so whatever, you're going to run into this or that. It's what you're intimate with. But there are some things remarkably, somebody told me that, who was it who said this? I think it was one of the big philosophers. I want to say Kierkegaard or something like that, who said the greatest assault to the ego known to man is children. Period. We're young and we think, oh, I'm going to have a boy. And you think of blue, I'm going to have a girl, pink, and at least in the 50s, when I was in that world, I didn't know anything. Labor, anything that actually involves a body. It isn't just some kind of spiritual thing that's all happening up here. And then you have it, and you have the ideas of how everything's going to be perfect, whatever you go into, it's going to be great. What you're going to do, you're finally going to say it the way it should be said, whatever. And then you get hit over the head with the big no of the universe or the big pause. So that's probably enough, because we want some time for questions. And it's just a touching on the subject. And making sure I don't insult any of my children with the grandchildren who watch this. I have a bunch of more poems, but maybe after the questions and answers, we'll take a second and I'll kind of close with a poem. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Myosho. I could really feel your talk as a parent, and I know we have members too who have kids with ups and downs. I'll just open the floor. Anyone have any questions? Don't be shy. Koku.
Hi, Myosho. Thank you so much for coming and talking to us. This is less of a question, more of a comment, just with the person who said to you, where's the Zen in the chapter? What I absolutely love about this book, including your chapter, is just that it really is where practice happens. You can read all these other books which explain to you how to do Zazen, and they're very valuable. But in this book, what we get to see is real people living real lives that are messy, that don't conform to some sort of nice spiritual, like you say, just having nice children, well-behaved children. I mean, who has them anyway? But
I don't know who those people are.
But yeah, it's great. And when I first read this book a couple of years ago and loved it, so was really happy when Jundo said, let's read it again. And in the meantime, my youngest daughter has developed a severe mental health problem. So reading it again was really important. And it is such a hard thing to practice with. And your comment that kind of just opening your heart and listening, it's all we can do. And I don't know if you kind of think, well, I kind of think at the minute, because my daughter's just kind of stuck. She's not going backwards. She's not going forwards. And it's all I've got to give. And it's like, is that enough? But what else can you give? That's the question. It's just seems so difficult, because you want to, especially with your kids, you really, I think when it comes to yourself, you can get into this Zen thing of, I'll just sit on the cushion and let things be, things I don't need to fix things. But as a parent, when it comes to your kids, I find it so much harder. It's just like, no, I need to fix it.
Yeah, I need to fix it. Yeah, go on more. I mean, exactly. Unless you want me to.
No, I'm just so grateful for that. And also as a botanist, I loved your thing about Zazen and being a taproot. And I was like, yeah, of course it is.
Of course it
is. I know it never occurred to me before, but it's like, yeah, it's like a big old dandelion root which connects you to everything. And it's just so many, I just want to say thank you for so many gifts, both in the chapter and in this talk. And I think the greatest, I really struggle when I give talks to talk about my life, because I was an academic, so I talk about all the academic stuff. And I'm learning from all the teachers that come here and all the people in the Sangha who can talk about their life. And I think it is just the greatest gift when people come and just share their unique experience of life and what practice looks like in that life. So thank you very much for coming here and doing that for us.
Thank you for having me and listening. And yeah, love is enough. And love is attention and being with people. The same daughter that got me into Zen to begin with, so to speak, when she was 11 years old, she was a pistol. And she, in the Peanuts comic strip, there's this character, I think it's Linus, and everywhere he goes, maybe it's not Linus, Pigpen. Everywhere he goes, he kicks up dust and leaves dust behind. Everything makes a mess. So she was like that. She'd walk through the room and she'd leave behind her wailing other people and people having fights. It was all peaceful until she was troubled with stuff. And so I didn't know what to do. She was 11, so I was like 31 or something. And so she was just got worse and worse. It's like crying out, right? But you don't know what to do. So one day, I don't know where it came from. This was before Zen, but this is Zen anyway, where this intuition comes up. We had a rocking chair. I said, you sit in that chair. And I didn't even know if she would actually sit. That's how wild she was. I go, you sit in that chair. And then I brought another chair, set off. I said, we are not getting up until you say one honest thing to me, one true statement of who you are. So she sat there in the rocking chair and she goes, I hate you. I said, okay, you can get up now. And then a big fuss a little while later. And I said, you sit down in that chair. And I said, you don't get up until you say one honest thing about how you are. She goes, I want to run away from home. I said, okay, thank you. You can get up now. And for a long time, I didn't realize that she was getting the attention she needed because I was so busy with the other kids. I'd stop cooking dinner. I'd sit across this chair. And everybody else is going, whoa, look at all the attention she's getting. But, for a long time, it was like several times a day. She'd have to sit on that chair and everything would stop. And then after a while, it was like a few times a week. And then till one day I realized, golly, we haven't sat in the chair in a long time. So what is it that I gave her? Attention? And that took that form, but it's very creative, the different forms that can arise. So good luck with your daughter. Thank you.
I want to mention, if anyone is watching at home at YouTube and has a question, just email it to jundotreeleaf@gmail.com, and I'll try to read some. Anyone else who's here have a question?
Shokai here.
Shokai, yes, we can hear you. We can't see you, but we can hear
I'm
you.
sorry, I can't put my camera on. If I put
That's
my
good.
camera on, the sound breaks up, so I'll leave it off. But Myosho, when you were in Nagoya,
Hi.
I was living in Hiroshima, and I read the Zen Seeds, and I was just hoping that maybe you could say a few words about Reverend Aoyama and her, what you take away from knowing her.
Many, many things. So many. Thank you for asking. I remember somebody brought that up. Maybe I could talk about that. I'll tell you something I learned from her. I'm pretty sure she's the one that taught all of us this. But this was interesting for me as an American, that after World War II, when the Marshall Plan, and I guess it was, that came in and started to help rebuild Japan, our leadership, our generals or whoever, had the chutzpah to say, we will not give any money to any organization that doesn't treat women equally. I mean, we could just turn around and look at the way we were treated in those years, right after the war, how unequally at the very least. So, but that's what they said. So Soto Zen, women could not officiate at Eheiji or Sojiji. Women could not be the abbots of their own monasteries. When they had to have a man, they couldn't handle their own money. There had to be a male abbot over all the women. Period. That abbot wouldn't have done any of the work that's required in a monastery. That would be done by like the sub abbot or whatever, if they even were able to have that title, someone like Aoyama sensei or her teacher. So, but the women practiced medieval Zen in the Zendo. So the men would come in for, I think it's a 3-year period usually in Japan, and they would do all the hard work like everybody has to do, right? But they'd have some time off. They go home on, it wasn't like as rigorous as these women. And after the 3 years, they would then go home, maybe get married, and, take over their father's temple or whatever. But the women just stayed day in, day out, medieval practice, the same practice as Dogen. So when the Americans came in and said, you can't have any money to rebuild your temples unless women are equal, Aoyama sensei's teacher just came right in and said, we want to run our own temple. like insist upon it. And I want to officiate at AHG. And she was Yama Sensei's teacher was the first one. I hope I have this history right. It's something like this. She was the very first one first female to ever officiate, probably for 15 minutes, but officiate at AHG. So that's, as a woman and a feminist and American, that story stuck with me. I could talk about a bazillion other things, but I appreciated the feminist spirit and the hard work. And they're still living in a medieval way. I mean, we had lovely tea in the afternoon. We're not bringing water in from the well or chopping wood so much anymore, but the rigorousness of the practice cannot be disputed. And that doesn't lighten up. You have a 3-month ongo, you go home, you can go, but while you're there, you're working. So I hope that's a good story about Ayama Roshi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Another question? I had someone want me to ask you a question who couldn't be here today.
Okay.
You've kind of already answered it, but I'm going to ask again. So they want to know, when you're at a crisis with a child that's at the worst of the worst of the worst.
Mhm.
I mean, you're just so worried about your child, and you're just at the end. How does your Zen practice get you through it, or help get you through it?
I'll go back to Zazen. It's so painful when one of your children is in an acute situation. And the pain is in me. They are having the situation they're having, but the hindrance is my own fear of feeling the pain. And it isn't necessarily my pain about them, it's my pain about how I didn't have this to give them, or I'm, blaming my mother for still working in a cafeteria. Like, the pain is mine. And so in Zazen, we are protected whilst we are in Zazen. Anything that our mind brings up, our body and our mind and our spirit can handle. So in the face to face with a child who's in real trouble, we can't get out of the quagmire of our own responsiveness. But if we just take a step back and sit in Zazen and allow ourselves to feel all of it, then we see what's us and we see what's them. And we have to walk through the weeds of us, but we have to feel that pain or we won't get through it. And we'll just project all over our child. So in Zazen, and I don't know any other way besides a deep reflective state, in the protection of Zazen, where we are free to allow the worst fears, the worst possible outcomes, everything that's upsetting us, we allow it to come up and we feel it. And then it goes until pretty soon we just see them. And then all of a sudden insights arise. So that's my take a minute and sit with it. When you don't know what to do, like my grandmother said, if you don't know what to do, don't. So if you don't know what to do, sit. Better that than doing the wrong thing over and over and over again, because you have such a good, noble spirit, I hope that's useful.
Is it okay, Myosho, to stay a few more minutes? A
I'm-
little long?
I'm now into this. I'm happy to be here for a while.
If anyone has to leave, we understand completely, but another question? No? Is your chance? Okay, then I have one again.
Okay.
We have several priests in training here today. And whenever I get someone who has trained as extensively in both California, and then you've gone off and to Japan and done it the one of the finest places to train. I'd like to ask you, this is the standard question. What did you find in Japan that's different from California, in the sense, what were the strengths in Japan that we're missing in America in training? And the other way too, what do we have in America that you thought they could use a little more of in Japan?
Oh, that's a big question. Well, you know how when you go to Japan, you've been there so long, you might forget already, Jundo-san, but when I went there, it's like, oh, we go up the stairs this way and down the stairs. I mean, that's different. Like, it's like we were all standing on our heads. The whole thing got flipped over, you know. The water in the toilet bowl goes down a different direction. I'm talking about just on a physical layer. Like, everything was the opposite. Just on the most base, like, I'm just like, where am I? What's going on? And so just that stuff, but that opened my mind to the deeper differences. Like, I grew up in Catholic schools and in a boarding school, right? And the hierarchy in those places is profound. And the nuns, you know, the priests and then the nuns in those years. And so sometimes I would go to San Francisco Zen Center, and not often because I was ordained and went right to Japan. So I didn't spend it too much time there, but a little bit. And I always kind of felt like, oh, I'm back in Catholic school. There's seemed to be this hierarchy and who's on first. And I found it intimidating. And I found myself being like a high school girl and being rebellious. Like, I'm not going to sit there because you tell me to sit there. That's what arose, you know, my kind of Western, I grew up in that. I didn't want anyone telling me what to do. In Japan, you know, and then when my teacher said I would be ordained, and I told some people here who are Buddhists and practice longer practitioners than me, they said, what are you, an insta-monk? You just want to get ordained and they ordain you. You don't earn your way step by step into this. Finally, you've done enough prostrations. You've done enough whatever for long enough over and over. And this one and then that one. And this one finally says, we'll let you in. You know, you're just going to go Japan and just be ordained. Like, what's wrong with the Japanese? So I didn't understand why at the San Francisco Zen Center or any of the big Zen centers, we have to go through all these hoops, right? Till we can even be ordained. Or in Japan, you want to be ordained? I'll ordain you. Now go practice. Send you off to, you know, they're not, you don't have, you'll go through it. There's not a hoop that you're not going to go through in Japan, maybe a couple of extra ones because you don't even know what they are. But it's entirely, you know, it's like whether you go up the stairs this way or that way, it's entirely reversed way of approaching it. And I found that in the temple, in the monastery, the woman who was the nun that was the tenzo, oh my God, if I was in the kitchen or having to do something in the kitchen or even receive a meal or whatever, that tenzo could tell me up one end and down the other if I didn't do it right. She had complete and total control over me. And I had to say, hi, and just do it. You know, I got the old sumimasen. My first words were sumimasen, gamendasai. I used to know how to say, you know, I'm grievously, atrociously sorry. I knew all of those words, you know, I was like, oh, I'm sorry. Did everything wrong. But when she wasn't in the temple, in the kitchen, when she wasn't with her title of being tenzo, she was just in the hallway. Hi, you know, like they were their title, their, how do I say this properly? They had a title, but they weren't their title. And when they had that responsibility, they were their title. And they were the tenzo. But when they weren't being the tenzo, they didn't walk around the rest of the time thinking, you know, well, I'm the tenzo and you're like new here. You know, I didn't have that. Now, I'm not saying that that's the way it is because I'm not really familiar. Shosan's probably wanting to give me a punch in the nose. Maybe not. But, you know, I'm not saying that the American or Western system is all kind of earn your keep and get there and we'll let you in if you're really good. But that was my experience of the difference. And probably I projected Catholicism all over, more than likely, San Francisco Zen Center. But that I found there to be this extraordinary humility because people kind of weren't being their position or their title. So, and then when they were in that position, then oh, you're doing a great job. So that was different about Japan, I felt. And I live in the middle of the meadow, so I don't really know anymore, you know.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Sekshi.
You're muted, sir. I don't know if you're okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming and offering this talk. It really resonated with me as a father, but also as one of, you know, Jundo's trainees in the middle of a meadow on the side of a mountain.
Mhm.
I guess I wanted to ask you, particularly because you literally just touched on this, what does it mean to you at this time and place for you to be a priest and a teacher in a meadow, right? Like I could give a talk to the chipmunks and to the
Mhm.
oak trees, and they would be very receptive.
Mhm.
And some days they teach me.
Mhm. I was gonna say, yeah.
I don't know where it goes past that. I don't know if you have any advice or just reflections on what it is to be a teacher in a meadow.
A few years back, I found that I had become burnt out. And I thought I shouldn't be burnt out, right? That shouldn't happen. But I was running Kumeido, and it was one day I realized that literally every second of every day, all day, for weeks and months and years, had been this temple. And I am a writer, and I began to, that instability that I came in with or grew up with, I began to get unstable again. And I knew that something was out of balance. So I needed to, and when I realized that, I realized I had to close the Zendo, like instantly. Because when you know you're taking poison, you don't just say, well, in a few months, I'll give everybody some notice and then I'll stop taking poison a little bit over. No, you just stop taking poison. So I think I gave the Sangha, after many years, 2 weeks notice. And I said I was going to take a sabbatical and that I would talk to them in a year. And I said, we have spent years talking about attachment. And this is your chance to practice letting go. That's my last Dharma talk to you. It was, of course, more elaborate because I like to talk, but basically that's what I said. And so then I'm here, and then I take about a year, and then I take another year. And then I go back into Zen. I was kind of like every Buddha in the house, every Buddhist book, any little tchotchke that was Buddhist, I took out of the house so that my home had not, at my home before, every window was an altar. Above the kitchen was an altar. Everything was an altar. I cleaned the place out, took every darn thing out, put them in boxes in the Zendo. I didn't change the Zendo. Like, it's almost still exactly the same as it was when I closed a few years back. For a long time, there was like 24 cushions out. Anybody could walk in at any moment. We could all sit down. Nothing changed. Incense pots were ready to go. But I couldn't deal with it. So then after I closed it, people were mad at me and they wanted to take the name and go on. I go, no, the name belongs here. And no, you can't meet here without me here. No, go forth. You can meet together, whatever, but not here. So then I stayed home for 3 months, and I didn't even know that I hadn't left the property. That's how tired I was. My husband was like my own personal human being. Do we need more milk? So he'd go off to work and he'd come back, and basically he was the conduit to the world, but it wasn't so much a conduit between me and them, because I wasn't talking to anybody. And I was just back like with Ayama Sensei, just washing and cleaning and puffing and just touching and feeling and not thinking of other people all the time or what I was going to say or what flowers to pick. So I did that. And then I went back for Zuisei, and I got back. I said, okay, I'm going to come back in. I'm going to do it differently. This time, instead of anybody who's, going through a divorce or lost somebody or whatever, having some challenge, they're going to go to the Zendo, and they show in up here, and then I'm with them for 2 months really intensively, and then they feel a little bit better, and then off they go to be a Methodist again. Oh, God bless you and whatever, but off they go. And then I'm going like 2 months. Just instead of that, I wanted people who wanted to study Zen. So I thought, I'm going to open it up again, and I'm really going to invite people who seriously want to practice Zen. Some of these knuckleheads who I had in here before, my dear Sangha, they wouldn't ring a bell if I asked them to. If I wanted to train them to do anything, not really Buddhist, like, well, what the hell are you doing here? But they loved all the Dharma, So that's part of why I got kind of confused and wanted to close it. Like, what am I doing? What am I doing? So I went for Zuisei, and I came back, and just then I started to talk to some of the old Sangha members, started to see where things were. A couple of years had passed when the pandemic hit. So now the Zendo has been closed for quite a long time. And someone gave us a big gift, financial gift. They passed away and they left it to us in their will. So then I go, oh, the Zendo's closed and now we get money. Thanks, Buddha. Like, really like, oh, okay. So I've been struggling. Like, I want to come in and do some writing or something. And I got like, first you have to start the Zendo again. And you need to get a Sangha. And you need to, like, come on, put your harness back on. And, you know, Myosho. And I just was inspired recently that I want to help Tempios and help them further get along with this gift. And that the mission of the gift was to establish Soto Zen on the north coast of Mendocino, California. And one of the best ways I can do that is to get Tempios up and going and have some, you know, people right out of Ongo, some monks come here and serve the community. But I'm a little old to start the whole thing all over again. So in the interim, every single person I meet, I'm not the teacher, but I am the Buddha, maybe, you know, as are they to me. If they want to know something, I will certainly talk on and on about it. But, you know, I'm not a teacher like that. And I'm now doing a lot more poetry and writing all kinds of things. That's a good practice too. Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Tempios again is the monastery that Myosho's teacher Akiba Roshi has been working for years to build in just the Japanese way. I don't even know. He's bringing the architects over from Japan? Some of them
and the builders. Yeah, it's quite amazing. It's literally the very, very first classic Japanese, which is actually classic Chinese, which is actually classic Indian. The way a village would once be set up and where people eat and where the lavatories are and where the Dharma is given and where the sitting happens, like literally the ancient historic exact formation that China got from India, Japan got from China, and that we've got. So one of the things that I'm not doing a sales pitch here, but I'm just telling you why I think it's very important. It's important because, you know, like I've been in lots of different monasteries, not only around this country, but in South America and Europe, you know. And so there's going to be a sesshin. And so somebody right here rings a bell and somebody right across the room rings back to respond. It's beautiful. They do a good job. But what does that mean? Once it meant, hey, we're almost through with Zazen. Dinner's about ready. Once it meant a communication across, it was the whole life of the village, of the complex. These bells were communication. They were the clock. They were everything. And now we do them in an abstract form as almost like an art form. And so Tempios is, I believe, important because in the way that the Dharma is transmitted to us, and the Shingi and all of the rules and regulations and the way we learn these things is wonderful for our minds and our behavior and our relationships. But it's really wonderful to have the whole darn thing rooted in physical reality. So that, oh, that's why we do it. Oh, we do it like that. Then we can go and have, you know, be in the basement of a church or in our living room or wherever we're going to practice. And we can do those same bells and the same rituals. But now we understand where they come from. And they're not abstract or just like, I'm going to do it just like this because it's just so beautiful. No, we're going to know exactly what we're doing. And that will allow us to let go of the art while we are the art, if you know what I mean. Because we know what the roots of it is. So that's, I don't even remember what the question was, but that's my answer, whatever it was.
I hope one or two of our priests who are able get over there sometime when it's operating. They're not taking students yet. Are they anywhere close?
No. In fact, I leave here, and it's a 3.5-hour drive down to Koji, and I'm going down for a board meeting there where we're talking about there were many hindrances, you know, just like mental illness in children. Many hindrances, many codes, many zoning problems, many caretakers that didn't take care of the place, many problems, but now there's a brand new movement afoot, and it's going to kind of be launched this afternoon, actually, of getting a whole new game plan going and get the board back functioning. So it's kind of exciting. So I'm very much into it.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
All
So
right, well,
I'd like to
yes.
close with one poem,
please.
if there's time and people don't mind. Of course, I could close with a million, but so this is just one. I don't know. Okay, I'm gonna just one, and then if you don't want to hang up, I might do another one anyway. But this is the one. They're called The Sparrow. Okay. And this is another poem that's kind of about writing, but it's also about zazen. Okay, so when the days are short and hurried, and the evenings long and lonely, and all the deeds of sunlight are seen through glass only, and I hunger for the solace of water and green, but the joys of sunlight only are through glass seen, and I thirst for the air of the oceans and the mountains, but drink the despair of the city's concrete fountains. And all my desires are empty dreams, and I, the dreamer, afloat on a stream that whirls and whirls in a downward spire, while the sun and the moon recede higher and higher, and there's not a single rock to catch a hold, and there's not a single branch to catch a soul. And the morning is the evening as tomorrow is today, and sleep but a loss of light to lay the mind and the body in somnolent gray. Then I take up my pen and I hold it like an arrow, and I arch back my bow and aim it at the sparrow. Her sweet little breast, as vulnerable as I, and I shoot her in the heart just to hear her cry. And she sings and she sings and she sings for me, and her wings span all of eternity, and she swoops and she soars and she fills the sky with the flight of the spirit that will not die. And she sings, she is the sparrow, and she is me. Yeah, she sings, I am the sparrow, and I am free. So when the days are short and hurried, and the evenings long and lonely, and all the joys of sunlight are seen through glass only, then I take up my bow and I hold it like an arrow. And I'm sorry, I'm just feeling loud. I take up my bow and I hold it like an arrow. And I take up my pen and I hold it like an arrow, and I arch back my bow and fly with the sparrow. So sorry, I flubbed the end of it, but there you go.
That was lovely.
Thank you.
Myosho, it was lovely to be in touch and to get to know you. It's obvious when we meet certain teachers who just are, I don't know what's the word to say, just authentic and no pretenses. And you're certainly that kind of teacher. Thank you very much. If anyone later has a question, I'll make sure she gets it by writing. But otherwise, I will thank you and wish everyone good morning, good night, and safe driving today.
Yeah. Thank you all. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Good night. Bye-bye. Thank you, Myosho. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.